Book One is all about the bookstore ride for the last 40 years. And today I have my special guest. He is the author of the book I Dream of Things That Never Were, the Ken Kunken story. No other than Mr. Kenneth J. Kunken. Welcome to Book 101, Mr. Kenneth, and can you please introduce more about yourself?
Okay, thank you, Dan, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to share my story. I think the best place for me to start is to tell your audience that in October of 1970, while I was 20 years old and a junior in college, I broke my neck and had a spinal cord injury playing on the lightweight football team at Cornell University. And as a result, I am almost totally paralyzed. I have just a little bit of movement in my left arm, but nothing in my fingers or my wrist. And on the right side of my body, I could basically just shrug my shoulder a bit. So I'm considered a quadriplegic. And following my injury, I spent the next 9 months and 20 days in various hospitals and rehabilitation centers.
Mr. Ken, who were you before your injury?
Well, as I indicated, I was 20 years old. I was a junior at Cornell University. I was studying industrial engineering and I loved sports. You know, growing up, I was always involved in one type of sport or another. In high school, I played not only on the football team, but also on the wrestling team. Uh, Earlier, I was involved in Little League Baseball. I worked during the summers as a lifeguard. So I was always very physically active before my injury.
What did things that never were represent to you in your darkest moments?
Well, a number of things. But let me just tell you a little bit about where I got the title for my book. In 1971, about 6 months after my injury, I was asked to testify before a United States Health Subcommittee chaired by Senator Edward Kennedy. And 8 days after my testimony, Senator Kennedy sent me a glass paperweight in the mail that had an inscription on it that the senator said his late brother Robert Kennedy, excuse me, liked very much. Excuse me. And the inscription read, "Some men see things as they are and say why. I dream of things that never were and say why not." And that's where I got the title of my book, I Dream of Things That Never Were. And I like that title because when I was injured, the doctors, the medical professionals, few people gave me a chance of ever leading a useful or productive life. And I was determined to do more with my life than most people expected. And that's one of the reasons why I titled my book, I Dream of Things That Never Were. Because at the time I was injured, I didn't know of any other quadriplegics who were doing some of the things that I hoped I would eventually do.
What a small moment made you think I could still build a meaningful life, just not one I planned?
Well, I was fortunate that I had a great support system of my family and my friends. And they kept assuring me that while I had a significant physical disability, mentally, I was still totally intact. And they assured me as best they could that they would act as my arms and legs to make sure I could still do everything I wanted to do in my life. And thanks to others, I was able to do a lot more than most people thought was possible. They encouraged me, as well as vocational counselor at the Rusk Institute in New York City, where I was undergoing my rehab. A counselor by the name of Joyce Mesh encouraged me to go back to college and complete my education. So I did that, and I went back to Cornell soon after I was released from the rehab center, and I earned my bachelor's degree in industrial engineering. But I felt industrial engineering was no longer really viable field for me. With my limited movement, and again, this was before the age of laptop computers, it was very difficult for me to function as an engineer. But I was fortunate that I had taken some electives in the psychology field, and one of my professors, by the name of Dr. James Moss, encouraged me to pursue a career in psychology and to become a counselor. And with that suggestion, I continued my studies at Cornell, where I earned a master's of arts degree there, majoring in counseling and student personnel administration. And then to increase my counseling credentials, I earned a second master's degree, this one at Columbia University, where I majored in psychological counseling and rehabilitation. And I was fortunate to eventually be hired at a facility in Nassau County, Long Island, called Abilities Incorporated, which was part of what was then called the Human Resources Center, and is now called the Viscardi Center after its founder, Dr. Henry Viscardi Jr. And I was hired to work as vocational rehabilitation counselor for other individuals who had severe physical disabilities. And that job really changed my life. It showed me, for one, that still had the ability to help others, and two, that I could function in the workplace and actually earn a living. So, working at Abilities really changed my life, and I'll be forever grateful for them for giving me that opportunity.
Mr. Ken Kunken, thank you so much for sharing your inspiring memoir to the world. And how did you transmute anger, grief about what was lost into fuel for what it could be created?
Well, part of that happened to do with my new job. Working at Abilities and being able to help others really changed my life. It showed I still had a lot to offer, despite my physical limitations. And I felt that the ability to help others was something that cheered me up, made me feel better about myself. And I saw that some of the other clients who were attending that center were really working so hard to make a success out of their lives. And knowing that, that helped inspire me as well. But I might add, I was actually more physically disabled than all the people that I was counseling. And as a result, I think having me working at the center helped inspire and motivate others to do more with their lives. And that was a tremendous feeling to know I could still do that.
When did you realize your greatest barriers were not physical? They were societal assumptions or
Well,
even your own.
part of that happened when I started looking for a job. As I indicated, I earned a bachelor's degree from Cornell, a master's degree from Cornell, a master's degree from Columbia University, three Ivy League degrees, two master's degrees, and no one would hire me. This was in the mid 1970s. And at the time, you didn't see many people with disabilities in the workforce. And it seemed that everybody felt I was just too disabled to work. And I looked for a job for a year and sent out more than 200 resumes. I was even turned down when I offered to volunteer my services. But I knew that I could work and make a difference with some company in terms of working there successfully. And while it took a while, I was very fortunate to be hired by Abilities in Corp. And that made a huge difference in my life.
What a specific dreaming practice like visualization, future self journaling kept you anchored?
Well, when I was working, obviously, I kept trying to push the boundaries to hope that there was more and more that I could do. And, through encouragement from the people at the center and from my family, I kept trying to do more and more with my life. And as best I could, I tried to live the life as if I never had my disability. I was determined to try and do everything in my life that I thought I would have done had I not had this spinal cord injury. And that kept me motivated.
Again, Mr. Khan, thank you so much for inspiring the world. How did you fight for accessibility tools like education or tech become an extension of your personal recovery?
Well, when I was injured in 1970, that was approximately 20 years before the Americans with Disabilities Act took effect. And as a result, for the first 20 years following my injury, very few facilities were wheelchair accessible. Cornell, where I went back to school, was particularly an inaccessible campus. Virtually every one of its buildings had steps in front of it, and there was not one ramp or curb cut on the entire campus. On my first day of classes, I had to be either pulled up or bounced down close to 100 steps. And it took a while, but I was able to convince the campus to at least put in a ramp at my dorm, where I was living, because that meant I was going up 10 steps just to get in or out of my dorm a few times a day. So I worked hard to get Cornell to put in a ramp there, and even some tar by different curbs to make it like a curb cut so that I could get up curbs. And later, when I went to Columbia, I convinced the city of New York to put in two curb cuts so that I'd be able to go from my apartment to school without having to go up and down curbs. And I even convinced the building to build a small ramp for me. Later, I moved to Long Island to Rockville Center, New York, and I was able to convince the village of Rockville Center to actually put in 53 curb cuts for me to make the entire business district of the village wheelchair accessible. So I constantly was working to make more facilities wheelchair accessible and to provide more access for everyone.
By that, Mr. Ken, we salute you for doing that.
Thank you.
Truly a legacy. What was the first tangible thing you built, achieved that once felt impossible, aside
Well,
from what you told us?
okay. Well, in addition to going back to school, getting my degrees, and in addition to being able to work first as a rehab counselor, and then I later left that job to go to law school. I went to Hofstra University's law school and worked for more than 40 years as a Nassau County Assistant District Attorney. But I would say, without a doubt, my biggest accomplishments have been the fact that in 2003, I married my incredible wife, Anna. And in 2005, through the benefit of in vitro fertilization, I became the father of triplet boys. So, without a doubt, my best and biggest accomplishments have been my marriage and the fact that I'm the father of triplet boys who are now 20 years old and have just completed their sophomore year in three different colleges in upstate New York.
How has your live experience made you more effective mentor for others facing shattered dreams?
Well, it seems like for the last more than 50 years, I've been faced with challenges and had to overcome adversity virtually every day of my life. And I've done my best to do that, hopefully by keeping a smile on my face and a positive attitude while I've been doing that. And I've tried to encourage and motivate other people that there's an awful lot that they could still do with their lives despite the challenges they may face. So, in addition to writing my book, I've also done some motivational and inspirational speaking, where I've been before a lot of groups and organizations trying to share my story and encourage others to do more with their lives.
Mr. Ken, you are truly inspiring individual, and I hope our listeners or people watching right now, you will inspire them. Who
Thank you.
surprised you most with your support? Is it a nurse, stranger, or a former rival?
There are a number of people. One, I had an incredible nurse when I was first hurt in the hospital in Oceanside by the name of Barbara Crook. And she made an enormous difference in my life and helped me so much in getting through the difficulties of my initial hospital stay. But also, I received so much help from people like my Aunt Lorraine and Uncle Mel and all my cousins who rose to the occasion and helped me with the physical care as much as they could. My brother and my sister were great help and great support. My grandparents were of great help and great support. So I had terrific friends from high school that stuck with me every step of the way and did whatever ever they could to help me accomplish what I wanted to do. So I was really fortunate, Dan, that I had the benefit of a lot of help, a lot of support, and a lot of encouragement from not just family, but friends as well.
Mr. Ken, how did relationships like romantic, familial, or friendships transform in meaning after your injury?
Well, after my injury, I really questioned whether I could ever have a romantic relationship again. But I was fortunate that when I went back to school, I met some wonderful women that I dated despite being in a wheelchair. And they really gave me a lot of confidence to know that I could still date and have a satisfying relationship with other women and feel even better about myself that I could do that. So I was very fortunate when I eventually met the woman who would be my wife. I met her in 1999. And the more we got to know each other, the more we were convinced that we wanted to get to know each other even better and even more. And the more time we spent with each other, it turned into first a very good friendship, into a romantic relationship. And as a result of this past week, we celebrated 22 years of marriage and are so proud to be the parents of triplet boys.
Congratulations, Mr. Ken. We salute you and we are truly inspired. And as an author, what are your short term and long term goals?
Well, I was fortunate that I started working on this book when I was in the rehabilitation hospital more than 50 years ago. A friend of my Aunt Lorraine by the name of Albert Meglin visited me in a rehab center and suggested I write a book because back then he said very few people knew much about spinal cord injuries or about the rehabilitation process. And he thought it would be very informative to them if I wrote down what I was going through. And also, I guess he felt it may help me deal with my depression at the time. So he used to come and I would dictate to him for a while and he'd write down some notes. But then I left and went back to school. And occasionally, when I was back on vacation, I would meet with him again and do a little more. But then the book was basically put down for years and years until I met my wonderful wife. And with her encouragement and support, we sat down and more than 50 years after starting work on the book, we finally completed it. And now it's out not only in the hardcover book, but also in a Kindle version and an audio version of the book. And if people want to purchase it, they can go to my website, which is kenkunken.com, and that will tell everyone how to purchase the book. And I might add the audio book, I actually narrated it myself. So I'm very proud of the three versions that are out in my book now. And I've gotten very favorable comments from people who have read it or listened to it.
Yes, totally inspiring book, Mr. Ken. And thank you so much for sharing to the world and looking forward for more and more success. Good luck to your goals. And what will be your piece of advice for those people out there who want to be an author like you and to be inspired by you?
Well, for one, it's never give up. I mean, the toughest thing is getting started, but then the next toughest is keeping it going until you finish. And there were many times when, after I started, I would put it down for lengthy periods of time, but then pick it up again. And I found that with my wife's encouragement, the fact that I was able to finish it gave me something that my boys could now read and learn even more about me rather than me just telling them. They could actually see it in print. And it gave me a really good perspective of where I was way back when and where I am today. And while it was difficult reliving some of my experiences following my injury, I feel so good now that I've been able to relive not just that, but the progress that I've made and the progress that's gone on in the world with the Americans with Disabilities Act and seeing far more people with disabilities out in public and out in the workplace. And if I could play even a small role in helping that happen, then I feel my book is very worthwhile that it's now out there.
Mr. Ken, what societal impossibility do you still aim to dismantle through your story?
Well, still, there is a certain reluctance to hire people with disabilities. And while employers have gotten far better at it and far more people with disabilities are in the workplace, there's still a long way to go before the people with disabilities attain the same basically percentage of people in the workforce as people who do not have a disability. And I think the more employers come in contact with someone with a disability on a regular basis, they'll see that people with disabilities are some of the hardest working, um, most loyal and dedicated employees that an employer can ever hope to find. And I'm also concerned that for some reason now, the initials DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, have for some reason had a bad connotation, a negative connotation. And think people don't actually appreciate the benefits of diversity, equity, and inclusion, whether it be in the workforce or in education and in the school environment. I think people will find that the more they're exposed to people that are different than them, it benefits everybody, to be more a part of society in general. And rather than excluding people with disabilities, I think they should encourage more people to be exposed and to hire somebody. And I might add that when you leave your job at the district attorney's office, you go through what they call an exit interview, where you talk about what you thought was the best part of your job and what parts you thought could be improved. And I've been later told by the person conducting the interviews that many of my colleagues, when they were leaving, said one of the best parts of their job was working with me. And I don't say that to boast or brag. I know what they were referring to is spending time on a daily basis with someone with a significant disability. Because I think for most of them, unless they had a close relative with a disability, they've never spent a lot of time with somebody with a disability. And they found that it encouraged and motivated them to do a better job and made them feel better about themselves and the ability to work with and help others. And I think it's so important for everybody to appreciate that.
Very well said, Mr. Khan. Beautifully articulated. Is it essential to share your lowest moments, not just triumphs in this book?
Because everybody has low moments in their life. Some are obviously lower than others. Some people's challenges are obviously more difficult than others, but we all face challenges in our life. There's adversity, at from time to time in everybody's life. And I think it's important for people to know that it doesn't end there. There's still a lot everyone can do if they remain motivated, work hard, continue to improve, and are not afraid to take chances or make difficult choices with their life. And I think it helps people to have a role model, to see that they're not the first ones struggling to get to where they want to be. I think it helps people to know it's been done before and they could still do it now.
Mr. Ken, before we wrap up our discussion for today, I'm inviting you to please do listen to my other podcast, people. My other podcast, because my abstract essay is already in fifth season, abstract poetry in second season, and my book 101 review in fifth season too. Comedy 101 in second season, and my food 101 in its fifth season as well. Geography 101 in fourth season, and my baby podcast Law 101 and Mental Health 101. Love Letters in fourth season, as well as my Movie 101 review and Music 101. Science 101 and Sex 101 in each first season. Please listen to them wherever you listen your podcast. Mr. Ken, what's one dream you hope someone stops dismissing as never possible after reading your book?
Well, that they realize that somebody with a disability is just like everyone else. We have the same hopes, dreams, and needs and wants as everyone else. And I hope they see that somebody with a significant disability can not only go to school and get a good education, they could not only work and be productive in the workplace, but they could also get married and become a parent and have a wonderful family life.
Mr. Kenneth Kunken, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and wisdom to the world. And thank you for inspiring us. So, can you please invite our listeners to support your book itself?
Thank you. So, once again, if they'd like to visit my website at kenkunken.com, that will tell you how to order not only the hardcover book, but the Kindle version and or the audio version.
Yes, people, let's support Mr. Kenneth Kunken because if you support him, more and more and more empowering books like this to come. So, Mr. Kenneth, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Dan, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to share my story with your listeners.
You are most welcome, and people, thank you so much. More to come, people. See you soon.